Hey folks, I'm Ignatiy Vishnevetsky.
And I'm Alex Dowd.
We're here at Farmhouse Tavern, right by the AV Club office.
For the last time this year, welcome to Film Club. J.J. Abrams has heard the fans' complaints. He's read their notes. With The Force Awakens, I feel like he's made the Star Wars movie that's sort of a corrective to the prequels.
There are lots of complaints that people have about the prequels, but I think one of their biggest problems is a complete and total absence of compelling heroes. I think the handling of the characters is the most interesting thing about this movie.
They've built a pretty rock-solid foundation with the new characters.
Especially with Adam Driver, who plays the villain, Kylo Ren. He's something that this particular franchise has never had, which is a sensitive villain.
This is somebody who's aware of the legacy of Darth Vader.
And
has
aware of
modeled
the legacy of Star Wars
Right,
villains.
right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really like about the film is that it works that awareness in so that we're essentially watching a bunch of Star Wars nerds in a Star Wars movie.
John Boyega is very good in this.
He's
Oscar
great.
Isaac.
I feel like with that character, they set up a really, really interesting, almost like a moral crisis for that character. He's this stormtrooper who walks away from this life of killing that he's basically been raised to be a part of since he was a child. He's basically born into this life. And I think that's a pretty powerful idea that the movie sort of under-dramatizes.
There are a lot of dramatically very potent ideas that I think this movie sometimes it either underplays them too much or it wraps them in a reference to the earlier films that kind of robs them of some poignancy.
Yeah. Probably my largest problem with The Force Awakens is that it is so indebted to A New Hope and it's so insistent on repeating the narrative beats of that movie.
When you look at the original, what is the original trying to do? It's trying to take samurai movies, it's trying to take World War II movies, it's trying to take these low-budget Republic serials and distill them into one thing. It's trying to be all of those things. And all that Force Awakens is trying to be is it's trying to be Star Wars.
You're right. It actually made me think of all things of something like Scream 3, which is a film that exists in a universe where only the other Scream movies exist. In The Force Awakens, its main point of reference is just other Star Wars movies.
Despite their problems, I do feel like the prequels at least try to tell self-contained stories. And my thing with this film, which I did find very enjoyable for a lot of it, is that it's basically about characters searching for like the plot of an actual movie.
As much as this is a throwback to the original Star Wars trilogy, it's still a modern blockbuster, which means that it's still operating as a sort of extended teaser for the next installment. For what is basically a glorified piece of fan service, and that's what it is. And I think that's what it has to be for a lot of people. I think that this is fairly entertaining and fast-paced, and it gets the job done.
So Star Wars Force Awakens is getting a huge event release. And there's another movie that's opening in a week that is going to get this kind of unusual slow rollout with a road show. And it's a movie that I happen to really like, a heartwarming film called The Hateful Eight. This is Quentin Tarantino's new movie. It is a Western, sort of, also a drawing room mystery. It's set almost entirely in one room. It's 3 hours long. And it's shot in 70 millimeter.
I love the perversity of that, by the way. You're going to shoot in 70, and then you're just going to set it almost entirely within the confines of this one cabin.
He does use it in interesting ways to define this interior space, because it is such a stagey script.
Basically, these group of sort of Western archetypes that all gather at this one location. Kurt Russell plays this bounty hunter.
He's kind of a combination of different eras ideas of Western heroes, because he's very much a kind of a late period revisionist Western guy, because he's not a good man. But at the same time, Kurt Russell is just doing an impression of John Wayne.
He's doing a total John Wayne accent.
And not a bad one.
Yeah, he has this woman who he's bringing to the gallows, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. And along the way, they pick up a couple of more people, and they all sort of convene during this blizzard. And the whole film is about the sort of distrust that develops within this cabin.
Obviously, this movie owes a lot to many Westerns, classic and not, but there's also a heck of a lot of the John Carpenter version of The Thing. They are trapped within this frontier.
And who can you trust?
And who can you
Somebody
trust?
among them is the thing.
And exactly.
I hadn't thought about that at all, and I really like it. It makes me like the film a little bit more. I actually found a lot of this kind of alienating. He structures it basically as two giant acts, and the first act is all build. This plays like a really long instance of sort of delayed gratification, where we're just sort of listening to these characters talk Tarantino dialogue at each other.
Well, I feel like it's taking his scene structure. You think of something like any of the Christoph Waltz scenes in Bastards, which will start really, really polite. And then at the end, like somebody gets shot in the head.
Right.
It's basically stretching that out into a film.
There's something that feels like an exercise about it. For me, the characters don't have the spark that the best Tarantino characters do.
Walton Goggins' character, Chris Mannix, to me, like Mannix is the most interesting, the most compelling. And he just starts as this total caricature, like somebody
Right.
out of Blazing Saddles.
Total goofball. But I mean, I guess the other problem I have with it is after that really languid opening, the movie just explodes into this violence, and I feel like some of the more interesting ideas that have been introduced in the first half sort of fall by the wayside.
That opening is seeding so many ideas for really the last 5 minutes of the movie. I think it's the most difficult of Tarantino's endings, but to me, one of the most interesting. It's one that is very, very dark, but at the same time kind of hopeful and even moving in a way, and that's because of all of these themes and maybe ideas about how the law is supposed to work or how people are supposed to behave that the characters have been discussing.
The film for me sort of hits its peak right before the intermission. The climax of the first act is more provocative, I think, than anything in Django Unchained, and says more about this country, I think, than anything in Django Unchained.